Welcome to Martial Arts World Radio. I'm your host, Joseph Clark. We're glad you can make it. Our show features candid interviews with martial arts stars about how they endeavor towards their goals, overcome unfortunate human events and life challenges, and how they better themselves and pursue personal excellence through martial arts. Over the next 2 hours, we have 3 interviews. The first with martial arts legend and former world karate champion, Bob Wall. We'll be speaking to Bob on his perspectives and experiences with his 2 closest friends, Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. We also have my 2015 interview pre-recorded with UFC middleweight fighter and winner of the Ultimate Fighter reality television show, Elias Theodorou. And joining us in the studio this evening will be my wife, Tracy Clark, who is Compliance Commissioner for Amateur Mixed Martial Arts, Ontario. For those of you listening to us while on your phones, tablets, or laptops, be sure to check out www.worldblackbelt.com, the world's foremost martial arts online community, which was founded by Bob Wall. Also, I have 2 books to bring to your attention. Google the book The Tao of MMA, or go to Amazon and do a search for The Tao of MMA. Another book that I highly recommend you check out is entitled The Art of Peace by Morihei Yoshiba, the founder of Aikido. It is a very philosophical book that can be applied to any style of martial arts or applied to life by non-martial artists as well. This week's inspirational quote is from Sun Tzu, and it goes as follows: "Victory is reserved for those who are willing to pay its price." Sun Tzu, The Art of War, circa 500 BC. Before we get into our first interview, I would like to take a moment and share with you an introspective. Let me take you back to Eurasia, 600,000 BC. Primitive man crouches in a covering consisting of fallen brush and rock. Beside him is the carcass of an animal. He chews on meat which he tears from the carcass. Another of his kind approaches. Hungry and aggressive, the newcomer attacks. The 2 Neanderthals roll on the ground, engaged in primitive combat using fists, nails, teeth, and feet. The prize, no longer food, but survival. And it will go to the fighter who is the most aggressive, vicious, strongest, and lethal. Now, let's go over to Bayan Kongor Province, Mongolia, 7000 BC. A crowd surrounds 2 naked men. They grapple and wrestle as the crowd cheers. For the fighters, it is a form of civil dispute resolution. For the onlookers, it is sports entertainment. Indian epics and poems document martial arts as a form of human expression, with matches dating back 5,000 years from present day. Much of ancient Asian martial arts origins are based on a combination of fact and lore, with the assumption being that Indian martial arts spread throughout the Orient, accompanying religion. The commonly accepted origin and lineage of many Asian martial arts originated with Chinese Kung Fu being distributed along with Buddhism. Karate, for example, originating in Okinawa, Japan in the late 1300s as a result of a cultural exchange with China. However, a closer study also reveals that most Asian countries already had their own evolution of martial arts taking place out of necessity to protect themselves. It seems no matter what part of the world's history you examine, man has developed a form of hand-to-hand combat in order to protect their lands and people. Martial arts, like religion and philosophy, was progressed through innovations introduced by travelers who learned something somewhere else and brought it home or introduced it to their neighboring peoples. If one studies the life of Edward William Barton Wright, an engineer with the British Railway, it serves as a perfect example not only of the evolution of modern martial arts in action, but also of an early version of organized MMA. He studied martial arts in Japan while working there between 1894 and 1897, brought it to Europe and became an instructor, combining his grappling style with judo, English boxing, French savate, and stick fighting. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a perfect case study of the integration of multiple styles to create a progressive style of martial art. Roman Greco-wrestling was introduced into the ancient Olympic Games in 708 BC and introduced into modern Olympics in 1896. Judo became a Summer Olympic event in 1964. Taekwondo became an Olympic sport in 2000. And karate received half the votes, but not the remaining half votes it required to be included as a medal-winning sport in the Olympics. Yet. However, it seems it is only a matter of time. The Joe Louis and Max Schmeling rematch of June 22nd, 1938, was attended by over 70,000 paid ticket holders at Yankee Stadium and was radio broadcasted in 4 different languages as millions upon millions of people all over the world listened. The heavyweight champion of the world was one of the most famous global superstar celebrities. Point karate tournaments flourished during the 1960s and 1970s with multiple federation groups and leagues, as did American kickboxing, with sanctioned groups and televised events. Kickboxing was featured from time to time on Wide World of Sports. Martial arts in cinema also flourished, and the popularity of martial arts increased with its visibility in movies and television programs. The legendary Bruce Lee, who we will be hearing from Bob Wall about this evening, introduced his philosophy during interviews and his screen performances, which spoke of freestyle martial arts, a movement which would eventually become mixed martial arts, MMA. Dana White from the UFC went on record saying that he recognized Bruce Lee as the pioneer of MMA. Gene LeBell was the first martial artist to be paid professionally in an MMA match when he beat Milo Savage, who is one of the most devastating heavyweight boxers in the world. Theatrical wrestling, such as the WWE, began in the 1950s, but experienced its golden age in the 1980s, generating a windfall of popularity, merchandising, and entertainment, which could very loosely be referred to as combat sport. But I bring it up as it acted as a precursor to the UFC, insofar as many of the members of that fan base would see a new sport emerge in the early 1990s in the form of mixed martial arts and the early days of the Ultimate Fighting Challenge. Frank and Lorenzo Ferreira purchased the UFC in 2001 for $2 million. They sold it recently for $4.2 billion last June, with Forbes magazine recognizing it as one of the top 10 most valuable sports brands. According to statistical data collected by New York City-based research firm Simmons Market Research, 18.1 million Americans participate in karate or some other form of martial art at least once a year. 52% were men, 48% women, and there are approximately 35,000 martial arts schools across the United States today. Biography Online lists Muhammad Ali as one of the top 10 most famous people in the world. It also includes Elvis Presley, a practitioner of martial arts, who trained under one of our guests this evening, once again, Bob Wall. Biography Online further recognizes Bruce Lee in their list of famous people who died young. We now live in an era in which there's been more change and progression in martial arts in the last 100 years than there has been in the last 1,000, and in the last 20 years than there has been in the last century. This includes classical instruction, forms, MMA, boxing, lethal training for the armed forces, battlefield training, and restrictive training for police forces and prison guards. Martial arts. Where have they been? Where are they now? What does the future have in store? This is Martial Arts World Radio. We shall return after this short break with our 2015 interview with Elias Theodorou of the UFC. In July of 2015, I flew to Los Angeles and I interviewed several former world full contact karate title holders, as well as traditional martial arts legends and stars of cinema. Among them was the great Gene LeBell. Gene LeBell is an American martial arts pioneer and a proven champion fighter. He was the first paid publicized MMA fighter. He has performed in over 1,000 film and television productions, and he's authored several books. His students include Ronda Rousey, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Bob Wall, and Ed Parker, to name a few. He is possibly the world's most respected, beloved, and feared fighters. His styles are wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu. I want to share a few of his observations and perspectives as he related them to me during our interview. Gene shared with me that in society today, he felt kids are losing their values. Gene is completely against drugs and substance abuse. Too many people have too much time to spare on their hands, and if they went to the dojo, or for that matter, any organized sport, they would be better off. Martial arts offers that. Gene would like to see kids think healthy through a healthy lifestyle in the dojo. When I asked him if he was a fan of MMA, he said he was because it combines everything. He says, I've always liked combining boxing and wrestling. In an alley, quote, the MMA fighter is a favorite against just the judo or just the karate practitioner, end quote. When I asked Gene LeBell about Ronda Rousey, his reply was that when she turned pro in MMA, the amateur judo establishment shunned her. They're idiots, he said. If you're a good amateur, you should be encouraged to make the most of your talents. Now that she is a champion, her judo coaches want to take credit for her accomplishments. Gene said, I do martial arts and criticism be damned. And when I asked him what he felt the milestones in martial arts were, his reply was, the milestones for martial arts should be measured by its publicity. He recognized them as Ed Parker's publicity, then Bruce Lee's publicity, boxing, and now the UFC. Quoting Gene, I've been blessed because I've done so much. I still hear my name every once in a while. Mind you, it's not always nice. My advice to young students and kids, don't mimic a loser. The harder you work, the luckier you get. Always practice the golden rule. Gene commented that movies were the only way to make money in the old days from martial arts. He feels it's an institution. We cross paths with fighters, and it always makes me feel good when I'm at a UFC event and someone who met me 30 years ago comes over and says something nice. Gene says he's met some truly great people through martial arts. The real treasures from his martial art careers were the success stories from his students. He said, I was fortunate to help a lot of good people, and a lot of good people helped me. And Gene LeBell closed with, the friendships I formed through martial arts changed my life. A man never dies until he is forgotten. Martial arts is where we make our mark. And Gene LeBell wrapped up our interview by saying, work hard and have fun. Some great perspectives from martial arts pioneer Gene LeBell. This is Martial Arts World Radio. In 2015, I had the privilege of interviewing live broadcast UFC fighter and winner of The Ultimate Fighter, Elias Theodorou. Here is that interview. Elias, what can I say? This is a real incredible pleasure, and we really appreciate you cutting your training short this evening to join us on our show.
Hey, it's my pleasure, and I'm excited to chat.
It's great to have you. And where do we reach you this evening?
Actually, I'm just finishing up at the University of Guelph. I train with a bunch of studs here today. One of them is Jarvis, who just won the Commonwealth Heavyweight Wrestling Championship, and he's getting ready for the World. So I've been having the privilege of the last couple of weeks with him just dumping me on my head. It's been a blast.
And what activities have you been focused on over the last while?
Well, my next fight just got announced. I'm fighting October 4th in Halifax. This will be my second time going to Halifax, as I'm actually the ECC middleweight champion there, but it will be the UFC's first time there. So I'm excited to go back. And who will you be fighting? Well, I would argue a dead man, but he does have a name. It's Bruno Santos. He's 14-1. He's a grinder, a real, I don't want to say wrestler because he's not, like, he's technically a jiu-jitsu stud. He's a Pan American Games winner and brown belt. But his whole game is he's a very short dude, about 5'9", but a hulk of a man. So he's going to try and grab a hold of me, throw me on the ground, and rinse and repeat. So I'm doing my best at places like this at the University of Guelph and also Montreal Wrestling Club and also a couple of places in between. So I'm getting ready.
And your professional record is 9 wins, no losses, no draws, correct?
Yes, and if you want to throw my kickboxing record, I'm also 12-0 with that. Technically, with the show, the last one I fought on the show counts to the UFC, but because it wasn't a live event, the website that usually takes all that and puts it in the record, Showdog, counts me as 9-0, but I'll digress. I'm undefeated. That's all that matters.
And for our listeners, if they're interested in the front of their laptops or their tablets, if you go to Google and just put in Elias Theodorou, actually UFC.com has a good tail of the tape and some stats on Elias. 26 years of age, 6'1", 185 pounds, and your nickname is the Spartan.
Yes, the shoe definitely fits. My parents are of Greek descent, and I'd like to say every once in a while I do push kick people in the face, so like I said, the shoe fits.
And for the benefit of our listening audience, Elias, I'm just going to read a description here off of Wikipedia about the UFC. I'm sure the majority of our audience knows what the UFC is, but just in case, the Ultimate Fighting Championship is the largest mixed martial arts promotion company in the world, featuring most of the top-ranked fighters in the sport of MMA. Based in the United States, the UFC produces events worldwide. The organization showcases 9 weight divisions and enforces the unified rules of mixed martial arts. And MMA is one of, if not the fastest growing sport in popularity in the world today. So, Elias, not to put you on the spot, but would you help me out here by explaining to our audience or describing what the television program The Ultimate Fighter is?
Well, The Ultimate Fighter has a history dating back to, I want to say, 2005, with the first season, which saw the one of the most famous fights now, The Ultimate Fighter finale, Forrest Griffin versus Stephen Bonner. But before that, there's roughly, I believe, 16 contestants normally that compete in a tournament in the course of 6 to 7 weeks in total isolation. And you fight in the tournament, and you make your way to that elusive contract. That's what everyone's there for. There's a little bit of fun and a little debauchery in between, but it's all a good time, and everyone's there for one specific goal, the win.
And, of course, being a reality television program, a good portion of the entertainment is just the day-to-day interactivity of all these fighters living in the same house, correct?
Oh, yeah, it's true. Actually, one of the crew members told me that roughly 48 hours each day was filmed, if you think about it, because there's 2 teams, 24 hours. Well, ours was a team, one, the nation, so 2 teams, 24 hours each. That's 48 hours of filming each day. And each episode was a combination of roughly 3 days' worth. So that's a lot of hours to edit through.
So, Elias, how challenging was the psychological aspects of housing with these guys? Were you housing with your own team? You don't house with your competitors, right?
No, yeah, yes, you do. So what ends up happening is normally I was on a special season, which is the what do you call it? Team Canada versus Australian nations. So everyone's locked up together, but right off the bat, everyone kind of splits off into our teams, and then actually, when you look at it, it's actually a one-person tournament, right? Like it's an individual sport. So as soon as, even though you're starting off as team members, everyone's good to go.
And so, is there a sight game being played amongst all of the players when they're out of the gym or out of the octagon?
Oh yeah, for sure. You size people up. You get to learn about them and how they operate and how they think, and it's all relative to cage. And it might sound a little manipulative. A little bit sneaky, but even in training with my teammates at the beginning, who I eventually fought with Sheldon, the whole time you sizing him up because he could be my opponent in the finals, and he was.
During your season of The Ultimate Fighter, did you find there was anybody that you were housing with who was a bit of an antagonist?
Some people would say I was that guy. I'm a little loud, I'm very opinionated, but all in good fun. Everyone kind of said, I think the overall tone of me is he's loud and somewhat annoying, but he's really nice. So that's what I got.
And what is life like now for Elias since you've won The Ultimate Fighter?
Well, I try not to talk third person as much as possible, but so far so good. I'm kind of like just going with the ride. This whole thing's about I would relate it to life in general. It's a journey, and I'm enjoying the ride.
And have you been approached regarding sponsorships or any kind of business-related offers?
Oh, yeah. Now at this point, and even with my time, like since actually the house going more into it, my time is valuable in some ways. So there's some things I just have to turn down because training comes first and different opportunities outweigh the other. So at this point, it's all about time management, and I'm actually taking care of less and less of the day-to-day stuff. I have people. I have a media team. I have many different coaches that take more and more of the load from me, and I become, for lack of a better word, more of a robot. I'm getting ready to fight someone, and I gotta take away any other thought than winning, which is my goal.
Elias, your web presence is very impressive. And where can our listeners go, or where would you prefer our listeners go to check you out? Where can they find out some more information about you that you'd like them to visit?
Yeah, my Twitter is at Elias Theodorou, and that's where you can see a lot and hear a lot of my day-to-day stuff, just my training. Now that I have a fight booked, a lot of it's going to be focused on just training, and I really love communicating, I guess, for lack of a better word, with my fans and just people that want to talk to me. So if you find me on Twitter, you can strike up a conversation and I'll talk back. And then also on Instagram, I'm at Elias UFC, and then my website is eliastheodorou.com.
Do the fights during the television series, do they go towards your professional record?
The final one does. So I had 2 fights in the show. The first one is a 2-rounder, which is technically an exhibition, so it doesn't count. What the UFC now is starting to do is count the semifinals and further. So the semifinals start to count because in reality, the prerequisite to actually join the Ultimate Fighter is only 3 professional fights. So in order to boost their records, because someone coming in with 3 fights versus, let's say, my 10, my 9 now, it's a huge disparity. So what they want to do, especially in some of the new markets that they're coming out into, China, Mexico, and stuff like that, they might not have that many fights. So they want to beef up the record as soon as possible. So the semifinals are now starting to count, and of course the final does.
So before you won the television series The Ultimate Fighter for your weight class and got your UFC contract, you had referenced that you had fought professionally as a kickboxer. Where was that? What league was that in?
No specific leagues. What ends up happening is a couple of those fights, 3 of them in fact, were in Thailand, and then a few of them were out in Ontario, and I did a little boxing today, so my mind is a little lost. But long story short, there's 12 of them. I want to say 4 or 5 in Thailand, actually, and the rest in Canada.
Thailand. So to go kickbox in Thailand, I mean, this is no small deal. Were you actually Thai boxing, or were the fights just simply taking place in Thailand?
No, they were Thai boxing. Basically, when I started mixed martial arts, it was right after my first year of university. I was enlightening in the mind. I wanted to do the body next, and that's where I got into martial arts, and I literally just never left. I loved it. So once I finished martial arts, my university career, pretty much right after getting my diploma in the ceremony, I jumped on a plane and went to Thailand. I spoke to my parents, and I said this is really something I wanted to do, and they were fully behind it. Of course, when you tell your parents you want to be a professional puncher and kicker, they had their reservations, but so far so good.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Mississauga, on the outskirts. Basically, it depends on where the map says, but either Oakville or Mississauga.
And how did you get into MMA originally?
Like I said, it was just after my first year of university. One of my younger brother's friends has been doing it forever, and he invited me out, and I went, and I just never left. I loved it.
And what styles or disciplines did you train in? Or
right off the bat, I was into jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, and it was after my kickboxing in general, and throw in the elements of boxing because I'm not as traditional in boxing, especially when you throw in my kind of style. I'm very unorthodox. So boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and then after my second fight, when I started to add new gyms and started really training all around the GTA, that's when I started adding wrestling, and here I am again in the University of Guelph.
And what other interests do you have?
Well, honestly, many. I like to scatter my hands and my mind all over the place. I used to be I was a semi-pro skateboarder when I was in high school, and baseball player. I'm also a marathon runner, so running is one of my favorite things. It's really a form of meditation in many ways. I just honestly just put my feet to the pavement and I'll run for like an hour or two and just plan out my day or just get my mind away from everything. Nothing better than a midnight run.
Are you still competing as a semi-pro skateboarder?
No. One too many bumps and bruises. I broke my hand, 2 breaks, 4 fractures, which actually, funny story, I can't really move my wrist too much. It's kind of really locked, which actually makes a perfect jab.
I thought you were going to say it would also help you not getting pinned.
Yeah, well, that too. It's honestly, it kind of like fell full circle. No complaints.
Yeah, so there's a lot of injuries in skateboarding, so I would imagine that's an unnecessary risk for you given what you're doing now.
Yeah, especially the skateboarding doesn't pay the bills. With that being said, I honestly throw on the headphones every once in a while, and I'll just skate around. Life's a music video in that case.
Nice. And I mean, to be a marathon runner, that requires a type of determination and discipline as well that I think would probably serve you well as a fighter.
Yeah, my style, I would say, is like, as someone that started mixed martial arts later, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. In some ways, you have to be. You always have to learn and kind of be equal at everything, because unless you're one of those people that have been wrestling since they're a little kid and just learn a little bit of boxing or kickboxing, whatever the case may be, you got to learn it all. You got to pick up where you left off. So, I mean, just kind of always learning. So for me, I'm kind of a workhorse. That's my style to win. Like, I honestly break people. One example is my 4th fight in Bellator. I took that a fight on 6 days' notice, by the way, and he didn't make weight. But with that being said, I just honestly put him to the grind, and he eventually quit in the 3rd round.
How difficult is it to make weight?
It's a science. I'm really good. I have really good people behind me. My coach, he's actually a biologist, so I am the guinea pig of sorts. And it's honestly one of those things at this point, not doing it, if you count all the fights, all the this and that, I've done it 11 times, and I'm now starting the 12th time. I know the light at the end of the tunnel. So as bad as it is when I'm actually cutting weight, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it usually involves Nutella and some bread. So it's no complaints there. But actually, if you like, I can actually explain how I lose 30 pounds in the case of 3-4 weeks.
Sure, please do.
Yeah. So again, I'm actually very fortunate. I have a very great sponsor and an amazing lifesaver, I would say, Fuel Foods. So it's prepackaged foods, and I have a nutritionist who they work with, and it's based on my body type, what I need as an athlete. And then through the diet, I usually walk around about, now that I've added some strength and conditioning for the last 6 months, I'm anywhere around 215. So the first 15 pounds is all diet, just chipping away at it and whatnot. And then we're right about 200. That's when we're about 2 weeks out. We add what's called water loading. So I'll drink about 8 liters a day, and I'll do that for about 5-6 days, and then slowly taper off, and then you add the distilled water, and it takes away your sodium and whatnot, and just basically chipping it away. So by the weigh-ins, the day of, around, let's say the weigh-ins are at 3, I'll wake up at 9, around 196, and I do what's called an Epsom salt bath. I put equal parts Epsom salt, equal parts rubbing alcohol into a hot bathtub, as hot as I can stand it. And I sit in there for 15 minutes while my coach obviously supervises, and I get out, and, well, the rest actually, when I'm in there, it opens up my pores and sucks out all the water. And I'll do that for 15 minutes, jump on a bed. They put all these blankets on me, turn it into like a makeshift sauna, rinse and repeat, and I can lose about 15, the most I've ever lost, 17 pounds in 2-3 hours.
Wow, what a routine.
Science.
Yeah, and how do you feel after all of that?
Well, I would be blind to say if it was a fun experience. It's not that fun, but the way I look at it, it's kind of like it's very, for me, it's again a form of meditation and a form of just being strong-minded. I break myself down to the lowest point, and I build myself back up. Weigh-ins are about 24 hours before the fight, so like a phoenix, I rise and I go to war.
Good for you. And by the way, for our listening audience, something that might be of interest is if you go to YouTube and you do a search for Tough Nation's full fight, Theodorou, you'll see that the top fight that comes up is Theodorou versus Manowara, which I suspected that would be from The Ultimate Fighter. And,
Yes.
This fight really showcases a lot of strategy. You had some good strikes, you had some good punches, some good kicks, but you dominated the fight and you really out-wrestled, and you were very strategic in how you out-wrestled him and how you responded to him. So I'd recommend to the listening audience, if they're in front of their screens, to check that out as well.
Truly appreciate it.
Now, Elias, family support. You must have to get a great deal of support from your family to participate in this kind of a sport.
Oh, yeah. My family's my rock, and so is my brother. He's my best friend. They've been behind me the whole time. Like I said, they had their reservations in when I told them what I wanted to do, but they saw me leaving every single day when they were going to work and coming back even later. There's a lot of driving. Unfortunately, I'm driving around a lot. I do on average about 800 to 900 kilometers a week in regards to jumping around and doing the best training in all of the GTA. There's no gym that has a monopoly on the best, and what I need to do is go and train with everyone everywhere. So as I started fighting, and again, just a side note, my coach at the time for my first professional debut wasn't able to make it. And the actually more crazy thing is after I came back from Thailand and I had my 3 fights, because I've been to Thailand 3 times now. So after the first time, I knew I wanted to be a professional mixed martial artist. So I literally just jumped on the message board and just started emailing every local organization, and Hard Knocks Championship was the organization that actually responded. And it looked kind of like they wanted me to be, for lack of a better word, a stepping stone for their local guy. I went down there with my brother, who knew even less than I did, and they knew me as pretty much a kickboxer because they saw some of my fights, and they didn't know I knew jiu-jitsu. So he picked me up and dumped me on my head many of times, and then at the right time I flipped him around, and I finished the round in 3 minutes, I believe. And it was just an amazing thing to say because I went with my brother, my younger brother, who knew even less than me about martial arts, and his, I guess, words of wisdom from his side of the cage was more like kill, punch, jump, kick. So it was very rudimentary, but it worked nonetheless. And it's an amazing bond, just throwing it out there. It's an amazing bond that I actually share with my brother. He went down the second time when I fought down there, and it was honestly the greatest experience ever. I went with my best friend to war, and we were victorious. And just to answer your question, as I started to, well, for lack of a better word, win more and more, and all these other side projects, maybe on different TV shows, different stunt work, and all the other things I have my hands in, all the different pots I have my hands in, it's something more tangible. My parents can actually show their friends at work, tell the family, and this and that. So they were behind me right from the get-go, but it's now an amazing thing to see that they're my biggest fans.
This is Martial Arts World Radio, and you are listening to my 2015 interview with UFC fighter Elias Theodorou. We shall return after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to Martial Arts World Radio and our 2015 interview with UFC winner of The Ultimate Fighter, Elias Theodorou. Elias, why the Spartan? Sounds like a great nickname for a fighter.
Well, my first coach, and thank you. My first coach, he was a Greek descent as well. And right in the beginning when we were starting, everyone knew obviously a lot more than I did. So just my relentlessness and my unwillingness to quit, he just called me the Spartan, said I had it in me, and it stuck. And hey, the shoe fits.
What kind of reactions do you get from people about your career?
Well, at first, everyone, even funny story, many of my first opponents used to just call me a pretty boy. So they used to just look at the book cover that is myself. Ironic that I have actually done a few book covers. But with that being said, they used to judge me and expect they would walk through me, and it didn't happen.
And you've done some modeling and some stunt work. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah, like I just alluded to, I've done. I always get confused. I've done 10 romance novels, the covers for them. I think 6 or 7 of them were Harlequin, and then the last 3, 2 to 3 or whatever, were another brand or publisher. And then I've done many different just magazines, catalogs, different, honestly, all around. I can't even list what I've done. And then you throw in the stunt work, the TV, a movie, and then, just a game show. Actually, I won a game show called Match Game on Comedy Network, so still undefeated in that.
Now, I shouldn't say many, a few months ago, I had an interview with an old colleague of mine whose name was Jalal Merhi. And Jalal's a producer and a former martial arts star. He did a lot of television, or a lot of film and television. Most of his martial art films were back when I was your age, which I don't want to share how long back that was, how far back that was. But he's worked with Billy Blanks, and he worked a lot with Bolo Yeung, who, of course, Bolo Yeung appeared with Jean-Claude Van Damme in Bloodsport, and he appeared with Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon. And interestingly, during the interview with Jalal, one of the things he alluded to is he said, I'm a martial artist, but I'm not a fighter. I like the art of martial art, but he said, I can't watch MMA. I can't watch guys beating each other to a pulp on TV, and that's just not for me. And I thought that was really interesting to hear a martial artist say that. And I'm sure in your travels, you must come across people who question, the ethics of what you do. You seem like a very graceful guy. You seem like a gentleman fighter. How do you respond to people when they react that way?
Well, to each their own. I'm not really particularly a fan of curling, but I wouldn't stop anyone from doing it. I'd like to throw in the fact that we're 2 willing participants in competition. Fighting is one of the most primal things, and even though it is a primal thing, it's chess, not checkers. There's a lot of athletics, a lot of just sheer training and learning and whatnot, but it's all mental. Especially at this point, everyone's good at what they do, and a lot of it has to do with that last little increments of just being the more mindful person. So although I can respect his opinion, and I understand where probably his background is more more of a martial arts of defense, and remember, there's both offense and defense. So I would just say it's just 2 schools and maybe 2 generations apart.
I enjoy watching MMA, and I'm a martial artist myself. I'm a big fan of MMA, and I don't, I obviously don't relate to people who say that they have a problem with it. However, I personally, although I enjoy MMA, I find hockey fights really disturbing because in MMA, the 2 fighters are professional athletes. They're pursuing excellence. They've got a mutual respect for each other's abilities, and there's agreed upon rules, and there's somebody there with them. Whereas in a hockey fight, they're just irate, and these people are just pretty well ready to kill each other if they didn't have pads on and somebody to stop them. So I don't think MMA is disturbing in that respect, but I still find that I come across a lot of people who have an ethical problem with it.
Yeah, and you know what? A lot of it has to do with the fact of it's a little bit still the unknown. If you're not really familiar with it and you don't know the rules and the mechanics of it, then an outsider looking in might have that opinion of it. But if they get to know with any of the things that you mentioned, you could definitely see how mixed martial arts with 2 opponents that are ready and just at that level are set to do something. And your point with hockey, I would agree with. It's anything kind of goes. There's set rules with mixed martial arts.
Do you have any martial arts idols or fighters that you idolized when you were making your way up the ranks?
Right off the bat, it was the personalities for me. The Tito Ortiz, the Chuck Liddells, and then a couple in between. My obviously favorite martial artist would have to be Anderson Silva, just with how dominant of a champion he was. I actually had the pleasure to train with him in Brazil when I went down there with my coach Sergio Cunha, and just the aura he had at that time, he was honestly untouchable, and it was an amazing thing. And with that being said, he's obviously gone from God to human in the last 2 fights, but I'm going to be rooting for him in his next fight with Diaz. But it was just, there are many martial artists that growing up I just looked up to, and you throw in Tyson and just this ferociousness, and you throw Bruce Lee and his mysticalism. Like there's just so many different people to bring up for many different reasons.
Now, this interview is obviously not about Anderson Silva, but since you brought him up, there's a lot of fight philosophers who say that wins make you weaker, losses make you stronger. And it seemed to me that his style was getting much more and more showman and very cocky. Do you think that all those wins perhaps had gone to his head and he put his defenses down and needs to go back to basics?
Well, there's a couple of things that kind of like what I've heard from different coaches who've worked with him in this and that I wouldn't say necessarily the wins got him, but maybe a lot of the notoriety, a lot of the fame, a lot of the other stuff, the non-martial art aspect of it could have gotten away from it. But with that being said, I wouldn't use the word cocky because he was always doing that. It was a mind game. He got you out of your element. He messed with your mind, let's just say the PG-13. And it's all Jedi mind tricks. That's what he was doing. It's just the person that he fought, Chris Weidman, didn't fall for it. And actually, just a side note, one of my training partners, Alex Ricci, who's actually fighting this weekend in Pennsylvania, he said to me one thing that was really an amazing thing, where there's always someone you can't beat. And unfortunately for Anderson Silva, that's Chris Weidman.
Now, on that note, how many fights, not to dwell on the negative, but how many fights can a professional fighter lose in the UFC before they lose their contract or get cut?
You know what? Again, you got to remember it's not only how good you are, it's how many people want to come see you. So you can throw in the Ed Hardys who lost 4 in a row, and if it wasn't for other health issues that actually came up, he had a heart murmur, so that stops him from competing again. He still had a contract. And then you throw in someone like Randy Couture, who has almost as many losses as he does wins, but he's considered one of the greatest. So, again, although it is a sport, and that's what makes it really different than boxing, because boxing, you lose 2-3 fights, and you're out of the picture. You're a nobody. You're a bum, right? But with mixed martial arts, if you're exciting, if you're just ready to just compete, there's always a spot for you. So it's kind of hard to work with that. Everyone's different, but one thing I would say, the bigger you are, it's one of the things I've actually recently talked with my coach. The larger the person is, the larger of a career they usually have, because the smaller weight class rely on more speed, and as you age, speed goes. But the bigger heavyweights, they're actually of the largest medium or median age. It's because power is one of the last things to go. You can still Hulk out at 35.
And the career impact on your family and your social life, how has that changed since, and I know I asked you earlier, now how's life changed for you since you won The Ultimate Fighter, but just as your career has grown, you've become more successful, what kind of impact has that taken on you socially in your circle of friends or to your family?
Well, I think now, like I said before, they're just starting to really understand it, right? My parents actually... It's really cute because, like, sometimes I'll stay with my parents because it's just where training is. If I'm going to train in Hamilton, I'm going to stay in Mississauga rather than Toronto, that kind of thing. But so I'll just hang out with my mom or whatever the case, and she'll bring up some news of martial arts or UFC that she heard, and she's asking if this person's in my weight class, or like just different things. It's just amazing to see how engaged they are into mixed martial arts and the UFC.
When you look back at your original goals and dreams for your career, was there a master plan, or are you just kind of making this up along the way?
At first, it was a little going with the flow. Like I said, me and my brother went to Calgary by ourselves and competed against the hometown guy. We were booed. We were almost halfway chased out of there. You know what I mean? And it was just a case of, let's see this. Let's go for it. Let's shoot for the stars and land on the moon kind of thing. But now, like I said, I have a great team behind me, and we have a definite plan. Nothing happens by accident. It's been a lot. It's been 3 hard years of work since I've gone pro, and the sky's the limit.
Elias, how many amateur fights did you have before you started fighting professionally?
I had one tournament in Hamilton. It was sports jiu-jitsu, which is it's a little bit of a hybrid of mixed martial arts. There's a lot less striking involved, and there's certain time limits, like you only have an opponent down for 30 seconds. But there was a national championship, and I went there, and I had, I think, 4 or 5 matches, and I was dubbed the Canadian champion. And I just knew from then there, this is what I wanted to do.
Is it surreal? I mean, you're talking about, for one thing, you're on The Ultimate Fighter. You're meeting, Dana and all sorts of people who you've probably watched on television. You're training with Anderson Silva. Is it still surreal, or has it sunk in?
It's honestly still surreal. I'm really, every once in a while I just step back and just take, because if you throw in the fact that I've only been doing this for 3 years professionally, and I have 10 fights, and I'm now ranked top 50 in my weight class in the world. And the people ahead of me and the people below me have 10 to 15 to 20 fights more than me. So just the idea of what I've been able to accomplish, what my team and I have been able to accomplish, it's a pretty amazing thing. But you can't just sit there and dwell on it. There's a lot of more hard work. I would like to say, what I talked about with one of my coaches is I've only just got my spot in the race. Prior to this is getting my spot. I had to earn my place in the UFC. So now the race starts.
And looking back now, I get that. You've just started in the UFC, and now you're really earning your place. But looking back on all the professional fights you've had to date, what would you have done differently, looking back now?
Honestly, there's not too much here and there. The one thing I've thought about, it would have been nice to kind of fight internationally a little bit more, you know what I mean, go to Japan and just fight on a small card, and just all the different stories that I've heard other people have. But honestly, I've been really lucky, and I wouldn't trade a thing. I've been so privileged, and I'm so thankful for where I am and the team that I have behind me.
Elias, would you share with us how you got onto the show The Ultimate Fighter? There must be a story behind that. Did you send in a videotape? How did that all work? Dating myself now, but how did that work out?
Basically, what ends up happening is it's an open casting, and there's requirements and whatnot. And the first aspect is you have to have 3 minimal fights and a winning record and whatnot. And there's certain criteria. I'm a little bit of a show pony, so I think I was 3 energy drinks deep after the first process, where we did a little bit of grappling, a little bit of striking stuff, or whatever like that. Just the basics, just to see what you knew what you're doing. And then it's all personality tests. So a couple of Red Bulls deep, and I just chatted away, talked about my great hair, and the rest is history, I guess.
This has been an interview with UFC fighter Elias Theodorou. Coming up next, Tracy Clark, Compliance Commissioner for Amateur Mixed Martial Arts Ontario. You're listening to Martial Arts World Radio. I'm Joseph Clark.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening. But they fought with expert timing. There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were chopping them up. They were chopping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew their part. From a fainting to a slip and a kicking from the hip, everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening. But they fought with expert timing. There was Funky Billy Chin and Little Sammy Chung. He said, "Here comes the big boss. Let's get it on." We took a bow and made a stand. Started swaying with the hand. A sudden motion made me skip. Now we're into a brand new trip. Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Martial Arts World Radio. I'm your host, Joseph Clark. For those following along on their laptops this evening, be sure to Google the book 21st Century Perspectives on Martial Arts. You can also find that at Amazon. I would also encourage you to check out www.worldblackbelt.com and check out Chuck Norris's charity, Kickstart Kids, at www.kickstartkids.org. Charity dedicated to developing children's character through karate.
Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening.
Welcome back to Martial Arts World Radio. I'm Joseph Clark. Joining us here in the studio is Tracy Lee Clark, Compliance Commissioner for Amateur Mixed Martial Arts Ontario, also known as the AMMAO. Tracy is also my wife. Tracy, it's great to have you in the studio this evening.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure. Tell us about the AMMAO.
Well, the AMMAO was created to oversee the sport of amateur mixed martial arts in a safe and regulated environment in the province of Ontario. We were finding some loopholes, and we wanted to ensure that they were, kind of tightened up. Our goal of the AMMAO is to promote the physical and mental well-being of all the participants while promoting MMA as an exhilarating sport in Ontario.
So specifically, what are your responsibilities as the Compliance Commissioner?
By and large, my primary function is to ensure that all of the fighters have provided the required blood work, medical letters, medical reports, and any other thorough information that we need, contact information that required for them to actively participate in an MMA event.
And what would be some of the challenges typically that you would face at an event?
Oh, to be honest, the challenges vary by event. I can run into issues with fighters simply not showing up to weigh-ins on time, or even not showing up to the event on time, or frankly just fighters not showing up at all. I've had, you deal with fighters who, once having their hands wrapped, they leave the back area. We can't have that, because once the fighter's hands are wrapped, we have to ensure that there's nothing added to the gloves. If they leave and go into the general public, we can't have any kind of foreign substances that could then get wrapped within the gloves. I can deal with stuff like setup, ensuring the safety of officials between the public and the cage itself. So it all depends on the event itself and what kind of challenges I can run into.
Where are the majority of amateur events taking place in Ontario? Is it mostly Western, Southwestern, Eastern, or is it spread fairly evenly across the province?
Well, at the moment, there's quite an explosion happening. We were more focused in southwestern Ontario, but on the 9th of September, we're heading out to Kingston. We have shows potentially scheduled in Sault Ste. Marie, and then we'll go anywhere from Hamilton, Georgetown, Cambridge, Kitchener, all the way out to London and Windsor.
So quite a wide berth right across the province.
Very much so.
Tell us the impression you have of the level of talent you see in the amateur fighters at events today.
Honestly, there's an abundance of talent that is moving up the ranks in amateur mixed martial arts. In the past, you would see fighters stick to one form or one discipline. So if they train mostly in boxing, that's where they showed their strengths. Fighters today are training in all sorts of different camps and training. They're becoming well-rounded fighters. Fighters in amateur mixed martial arts can begin competing at 17. So you're also seeing quite an age gap between some fighters. So you'll have fighters showing, the younger fighters, you'll see more stamina and more power behind them, whereas the older, you don't want to say older as in, super old, but they have more almost wisdom behind their training than some that are 17 that come out at the gate just like someone's released a slingshot. But, not all, there isn't a trend per se. I mean, you're seeing overall more well-rounded fighters than you've had in the last few years for sure.
So would you give me an example of some of the things that you've seen at events that were poorly run or unsafe? Give me some examples of what you see.
In the past, and it's certainly not under the banner of the AMMAO, I've seen things where weight allowances were slipped, or blood work was just not handed in properly, or the safety of fighters was just not taken into consideration in the back area. So it all depends on how you look at it, but we're trying to tighten up those loose ends so that we have a very safe environment for everybody.
So it sounds like the AMMAO ensures that the event is a quality event, that it's a safe event, and that they're putting on a good show.
Absolutely.
And to that end, when you see these events take place and you see the different class of fighters and different quality of fighters, are you finding that that their team is behind them? Is it a real team effort, or is it a family affair? Or do you find that people show up individually or independently?
You're going to have the whole wide berth. You'll have a whole team come out from a gym where they have 4 or 5 fighters. You'll have one coach and one fighter coming from, say, Quebec. And then you'll have the odd one that is literally an independent fighter that literally shows up by themselves. And in my experience thus far, the ones that have the support system around them are much more apt to be successful in the long run, as opposed to someone just training in their gym or in their garage, I should say, and hoping for the best.
Tracy, I'm aware that you did work for a professional fight promotion company. So you've seen professional events, you've seen amateur events, you've seen events that had both pros and amateurs featured on the same evening card. So do you often see amateurs that are actually better than some of the pros that you've seen fighting?
Absolutely. Going back to the strength that you're finding now with fighters, they're becoming much better at being a well-rounded fighter. So I'm definitely seeing a shift in how some of the amateurs today, you see the potential in front of them is just immense. As long as they continue to hone in on their skills and have the right backing behind them, they're going to go far.
Now, if I can change direction for just here a moment, if we can, please. We've been talking about mixed martial arts. Let's talk about Tracy Clark. Now, I'm aware that you actually were victorious in the fight of a lifetime of your own that involved a very bad car accident that happened to your father back in 1988. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that's a very inspirational tale for anybody of any walk of life to benefit from.
My dad was a professional football player, and he had been retired a few years and was involved in a car accident. A man ran a red light, and in that, my dad, the man that I knew as my dad, completely changed from that moment forward. He was in a coma for 6 weeks, and upon waking up, if you will, he didn't recognize us. He didn't know how to walk, didn't know how to talk properly. We literally had to start from scratch. So anything my dad knows today are all relearned memories.
So when you say you lost the man that you knew, to what extent?
Anything that was tagged to the past didn't exist anymore. He didn't remember anything about us growing up. He didn't remember any of the good times, even the bad times. It was starting from scratch. So all you can take from that personally is I can take the memories from the first, I was 18, so the first 18 years of my life with him, but they were my memories and my memories alone. They were never going to be his memories unless I told them over and over and over again. He suffered short-term and long-term memory loss, so every day is kind of like Groundhog Day. It's a repetition of days for him.
Now, your father was, as you mentioned, he was a professional Canadian football player. He was a Hall of Fame football player. I believe he also had some involvement in the coaching and managing of 2 boxing families out of Montreal, the Hiltons and the Griffins. Is that correct?
Not the Hiltons. They worked together. They trained, but my dad, he worked with some of the Griffin boys.
Okay. So obviously a proud man.
Very.
And after he recovered from his coma and he came home, what were some of the challenges that you and your family faced when you suddenly have a complete stranger in your father's body move back into the household?
Oh, it was it was stressful. Literally, socially accepted protocols that you grow up learning, he had no clue. So it was literally starting from scratch. He felt the need to go for walks at 2:00 in the morning, and you had no option but to go. the dog wasn't good enough. You had to go with him. I mean, you didn't want him to go by himself anyway. You just honestly didn't know what potentially could happen. And we lived out in the country, so you just didn't want him to walk and keep walking and not know to turn around and come back. And it wasn't easy.
No, it sounds like it wouldn't have been. And this was yourself, your mom, and your two sisters.
Correct.
Okay.
My grandmother was there too.
All right. How did you face these hardships? How did you overcome them? I mean, from an emotional standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, you obviously had to be very determined. This wasn't happening to you so much as it was happening to him. So how do you work your way through that?
It was really difficult. At 18, you're still relatively immature in your thinking. So you tended to go through the gamut of emotions. You were angry, you were frustrated, you were sad, you were happy that he was still alive, but angry again that it wasn't the man that you grew up with. So it's a journey that you have to take. There was no option.
It was forced on you.
Absolutely. You either drop it and run and never look back, or you get angry, grab it, and say, okay, I'm going to make the best of this, and let's see what we can do to make it a better day. And so every day is, it was a bonus, and every day you just learn to appreciate that, life can be taken from you very quickly.
And don't take anything for granted.
Never.
All right. No matter what walk of life you're in.
Absolutely.
Now, from your father's perspective, and I think this is very beneficial for anybody who's competitive, who's pursuing personal excellence. The theme here is perseverance. Your father had to persevere because he would have woken up from this coma in a ball of confusion and had to relearn how to live. And his wife and kids were strangers to him. Now, I know that he had related, and there was a movie and a book, both about him, and he had related something to do with Ryan Nolan, or the great baseball player. Nolan Ryan, I'm sorry, the professional ball player. Can you tell that story? Because I think when he was talking about only this pitch counts, that to me sounded like something that martial artists would benefit from hearing about as well.
At the end of the day, I think it boiled down to you had to put everything into that one moment. You put all your energy, all your focus into whatever it happened to be that you're doing at that moment. My dad was wonderful. As the year went on, 2 years after the accident, people would run into him and they honestly wouldn't understand the fact that he truly didn't remember who they were. And my dad was a great actor, and he'd be, oh, hey, how you doing, big guy? And they're like, hey, he recognizes me. And it's like, no, you just got to put your thumbs up and say, yep, absolutely. And
he's winging it.
He winged it 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I could have, brought a girlfriend home that I had worked with for years, and 15, 16, 17 times in a row, this is my friend Jackie, this is my friend Jackie. And then finally one day he'll go, hey, Jackie, how you doing? But then the next time after that, he may not remember again. So he literally had to put every ounce of his energy in concentration, which was limited due to the head injury, into every single thing that he did. And so with Nolan Ryan, he did the same thing. It was a tunnel vision. So every single pitch that he did, he put everything into it. And that's, my dad related to that.
Okay. So in other words, the pitch that Nolan Ryan just threw no longer existed. And the pitch he was, he wasn't worried about the next 5 pitches. He was worried about the ball in his hand at that moment and the pitch he was throwing at that very moment.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that your dad related to that, and that all that mattered was being in the now and focusing on what he was doing at that moment in time.
Correct.
Okay, excellent. Good wisdom there.
Absolutely.
So after all these years now, you're middle-aged and you have children of your own. Your dad is still with us.
Yes.
And what was learned from all this? What do you try to impart on young people today based on the experience that you had from this incredible life challenge with your father?
Don't take anything for granted. you honestly don't know. It could take it's a blink of an eye. Something could happen that will completely alter your life's journey, and it's in how you deal with that journey, those roadblocks, if you will. That's what's going to define you down the way. If you just kind of veer around them, you're never really coming into, you're never accomplishing the roadblock in front of you. You have to, you can't just avoid things. You need to hit them head on and learn from them, whether it's a positive or a negative. And if it's a negative, what did you learn from it? And if it's a positive, you kind of store that away and wait till the next roadblock hits.
Tracy, your father's speeches or motivational talks that he's hired to do are called Seize the Day.
Correct.
Please explain that philosophy.
It's the same concept. You know, you can't live in the past. The future, it's not yours yet. You have to live in today and make the most of this day. It's important to not, you know, worry about what's happened or what will happen. You need to concentrate on what is happening currently.
I thank you for sharing that with us. Now, getting back onto mixed martial arts, how did you get first involved in MMA?
Quite a few years ago, I had it was great fortune to be able to take a job with a MMA promotion out in Calgary by the name of Hard Knocks Fighting. From there, I was able to kind of move up the ranks and learn invaluable skills. And then I was able to take that knowledge with me when I was approached by some promotions here in Ontario. From those jobs that I had, then I was able to then join the ranks of the AMMAO as their compliance commissioner.
So when you were working with Hard Knocks out in Calgary, Alberta, who were some of the future pros that you saw come up through Hard Knocks that are now fighting perhaps in the UFC or other professional leagues?
Elias Theodorou, who you just played his interview. I had the good fortune of dealing with him after he's gone pro through Hard Knocks. Ronda Rousey was also another fighter that came through the Hard Knocks ranks. Currently, Misha Serkinov started with Hard Knocks, and he's now in the UFC currently. So there's been quite a few that I've seen kind of work their way up, and there's a young fellow by the name of Jesse Arnett out in Calgary, and he's going to go places. You got to watch out for the Wildcat.
Very good. There's there was a former world title holder, female boxer, Lindsay Garbat. Was she through Hard Knocks, or how did you make acquaintance with Lindsay?
Yeah, Lindsay started with Hard Knocks. She tried her best at the UFC, at the Ultimate Fighter competition. She's now, I think I read today, she's signed on with TKO out of Quebec.
Oh, very good. Good for her. So she transitioned from boxing to MMA, and we hope to have her on the air real soon for an interview.
Oh, that would be awesome. She's a wonderful young lady.
Very good. And what advice, Tracy, might you give young martial artists today who are interested in competing in the cage?
I think with anything, when you start in amateur MMA, it's good to find a good gym. You have to have that support system around you, whether it's coaches, managers, training camps. You need a support system. Immerse yourself and gain knowledge in all the disciplines. Don't stick to one discipline. Listen to your coaches and your teammates. They've got invaluable information that you can either take to heart, just say thank you and disregard, but by and large, they're all going to have something. And if you want to fight, you have to train. It has to pay off. You just can't walk in and expect to fight. You can't think that a few days in the gym and watching the UFC is going to make you a pro fighter. It just doesn't work that way.
Are you seeing that most of the amateurs are coming up from traditional dojos and then getting into mixed martial arts, or are they taking a fast track and just signing up at mixed martial art gyms and then learning it that way, or a bit of both?
I'd say it's more they're coming from more standard disciplines, and then we're moving into MMA as opposed to just saying, I'm going to try MMA today. They're kind of moving their way up through the ranks, and so they're coming in with a foundation. Very few, I find, are coming in with no solid foundation.
And Tracy, how does anyone connect with the AMMAO should they have questions about an event or amateur combat sports in Ontario?
Well, anyone can reach out to us at either ammao.ca or on Facebook at AMMA Ontario.
Tracy, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It was a real pleasure. Coming up next, an interview with martial arts legend Bob Wall here on Martial Arts World Radio. Welcome back to Martial Arts World Radio. I'm Joseph Clark. Bob Wall is a former world full contact karate title holder, a 9th degree black belt, author of the book Who's Who in Martial Arts and Directory of Black Belts, founder of worldblackbelt.com, and a close friend and business partner with Chuck Norris. Bob was also a close friend to the late Bruce Lee. Bob has starred in 3 of Bruce Lee's films, including Enter the Dragon, and he has also appeared in several Chuck Norris films. Bob, it is our privilege to welcome you to our show this evening.
Well, it's my honor to be on any show with Joseph Clark.
Well, you are too kind. And where did we catch you this evening?
I'm sorry?
Where did we catch you this evening? Where are you speaking to us from?
From Tarzana, California, home of Tarzan.
Tarzana?
Which seems appropriate to me.
Tarzana, California. And that was really called Tarzana because Edgar Rice Burroughs, the author of Tarzan, came from there.
That's correct. It was called Runnymede, and Edgar Rice Burroughs moved in, and he was the author of the Tarzan series. And so in 1928, they asked, could we change the name from Runnymede to Tarzana, and it was done. And it always appealed to me. I love Tarzana. It's a great town.
How far out of Los Angeles is that?
We're 30 minutes in bad traffic. Well, no, Brian, let me restate. We're an hour from downtown L.A. in bad traffic, but 30 minutes in good traffic, 20 minutes from Beverly Hills in good traffic, and 45 minutes in bad traffic. So we're in the valley.
And Bob, I just wanted to warn you that my wife Tracy's in the studio this evening. As you know, she is the compliance commissioner for the Amateur Mixed Martial Arts Association of Ontario, and she has a live mic, so she may have some questions for you this evening as well.
Well, I certainly hope so, because I'm dying to meet that gorgeous, great Tracy that you brag about so much, the mother of your 4 magnificent kids, and how she did it with your little help is amazing to me, personally.
Okay, I take it all back. I take back everything I ever said. So, Bob, do you still train?
Oh, absolutely.
So tell us about what your regimen would look like. Do you get up in the morning and train? Do you still teach?
I don't teach much anymore. Chuck Norris and I have several thousand black belts, and so once a year we have a UFAF convention. That's 4 days, and we bring in mostly outside instructors, but periodically we teach a seminar because basically I've done martial arts now for 60 years, and so after a point, you need to get out of the way of the faster cars behind you, called your students, who become way better than you if you're a good teacher. And so we don't teach a lot anymore, but I love it. Absolutely. Chuck and I think we were egotistically 2 of the best instructors in the world. They have to be givers, as you well know, and we were givers. But, eventually we created black belts so much better than us that we had to get out of their way or get run over, and we wanted to do it while they were still afraid of us.
Good for you. And I'm going to ask you in a little while about your entrepreneurial spirit and how you and Chuck succeeded with your schools. But in terms of training, you're still training daily, as I understand it.
No, I train 3 days a week.
Oh, very good.
I've allowed myself, today is my 77th birth, and, Chuck Norris, I love him to death, but in the old days, we did doubles for years. Train early in the morning and train late at night, and taught lots of courses, children and black belts during the day. And we just train, and Chuck's theory is if 2 hours is good, then 4 hours is twice as good. And he always trained way longer than I want. At my age, I didn't want to do anything that feels good for 2 hours. So I train an hour and 15 minutes, 3 days a week. I do aerobics. I have a bike. I have a treadmill. I have a fabulous total gym, and my invention, the Dynamic Flex, which is why I can do the splits at 77. So I always believed in flexibility. Aerobic is your inside health is your real health. You need to stay in, keep your heart rate up, and keep your arteries from clogging. And then it's nice if your body looks nice, so that your wife will still want to kiss you once in a while. If you get my drift,
That helps
the
too.
body should look good. Yeah.
Bob, tell us about your titles and your competitive career in full contact karate.
Well, first of all, I lived a blessed life, and I'm Irish, so I've been luckier than I should have been. But yeah, I took first or second in the internationals, the United States Championships, the All-American, the World Championships, the National Championships, the Tournament of Champions, where you had to win a major one of the others to get in. And so I was fortunate to beat people like Jeff Smith, who was one of the great light heavyweights, and Pat Worley, who won the national championships, beating my instructor Joe Lewis when I beat him. And then so I took second in the Tournament of Champions. I got beat by a fabulous fighter, tough old country boy, Kansas boy named Roger Carpenter, and he broke my ribs. We went 3 rounds, and there was a point separating us, but he won. And I was darn happy to get out of there and not have him kill me. But then the big title was World Professional Team Champions, which I was fortunate to be. I was the worst member of, but I had the great Joe Lewis, Mike Stone, Chuck Norris, Skipper Mullins, and me. And we won the world title 69, 70, 71, 72. And it was really avant-garde at that time because it was 3 3-minute rounds with a low kick. You couldn't hit the face. But on that very night in 1970, we defended our title. In January 70, Joe Lewis did the first glove knockout. He knocked out a guy named Greg Baines, black militant, who came in the ring as Home. So anyway, that was kind of basically my titles.
And you were competing in full contact karate before there were gloves and pads, correct?
Well, yeah, we started in the kumite, which, most people don't know, but it means to hit without touching. And that was... a fabulous early Japanese martial artist that created the kumite when 61 to 63, and his name was Oshima, Satuma Oshima, a fabulous martial artist. And anyway, he started the first fighting. There was no contact. So there's an idiot, fake, lying piece of human flotsam named Frank Dukes, who claims to have won the kumite and knocked out 352 people. So he's a liar and a punk and a terrible person, wears a gold, he's in a military uniform, Marine, claiming, and he's wearing a Medal of Honor. That's disgraceful and disrespectful. And Joseph, so much of martial arts is not about being tough, it's about being of good character, and not being a liar, cheater, thief, pimp, drug dealer, or whatever. And he's all those things. He's a terrible person, and I ever run into him, I'm going to preach to him. And I only preach to people once. They will find the Lord. And he's a bad guy and a fake and a phony, and he really belongs in a mental institution, but that's another story.
This is the Frank Dukes,
he
Bob.
knocked out 352 people, and so we asked him once who. Mary Smith, John Smith, Jane Smith, Fred Smith, Margaret Smith, come on. But anyway, I don't like those liars, cheaters, and thieves because, and I'm a military man. I was in the Army. I was in Fort Ord, got out in 1962. The reality is that we earn the right, we protect our country to give stupid people like Jane Fonda and Frank Dukes the right to be ridiculous.
Okay, so Bob, this Frank Dukes, by the way, we're talking about the Frank Dukes is the character that Jean-Claude Van Damme portrayed in the movie Bloodsport. That's
correct, which was complete fraud, and I'm even responsible for Jean-Claude Van Damme because he started writing me fan letters in '83, and after about 5 letters, and all letters were like, I'm such a big fan of the great Bruce Lee, and you, of course, and then ask 99,000 questions about Bruce and none about me, but that's another story. But in '85, I wrote him a letter and said, thank you very much, have a good time, and I'm busy, I'm not a big star, I don't have a staff, and goodbye. And he wrote me another letter and it said, and his name was Jean-Claude Van Berenberg in those days. I'm from Belgium. I have decided to be a movie star. I'm coming to America. This was in '85. And he came to my house and can I just have a picture with you? Sure, no problem. And because we're blessed to be good enough to have one fan, much less more. We came to my house, and that day, Bill Wallace, Superfoot, Chuck Norris, and I were training, and he came in to get a picture, and I was Elvis to him until he saw Chuck Norris and Bill Wallace, and then I became a little person. He must shove me out of the way to get to Chuck and Bill. Anyway, he talked Chuck into the workout, which is a big mistake. You got to work out with Bill Wallace and Chuck Norris, or Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee. You better be ready to throw up, or you better be in phenomenal shape. Because the dummy comes in, I saw that he talked Chuck into working out, and he had his gi, and I said, Jean-Claude, whatever we do 50 of, do 10. But he didn't listen because he was in his 20s then, 25, I think. We were in our mid-40s. And, of course, to a 20-year-old, you're in your mid-40s, you're one step from the grave, right? So, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth because he wants you to listen twice as much as you speak. But obviously that bean brain didn't listen. So 30 minutes into the 3-hour workout, he's puking on the pull-up bar. And Bill Wallace, get out of here, you cow, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then we finished the next 2.5 hours of our brutal workout. And then Bill went over to him. We spar after every workout. We don't. We'd stopped sparring a couple of years earlier. We'd done enough sparring. And he proceeded to just whack him around like a speed bag, left him pretty bruised, and then he left. And then Chuck, who's one of the great Christians, fabulous, amazing, unbelievable martial artist, but one of the nicest humans on the planet, felt so bad, and he sat down. And Chuck's so tough, he doesn't need to tell you. And I'm sure for all the listeners, they've read a few Chuck Norris stories, and trust me, most of them are true. But he sat down, he said, geez, Bill's beat me up many times. Wrong. Not even in the same league. Bill Wallace, if you're listening, you know and I know you're not even in the same league as Chuck Norris. That's another story. And so anyway, he proceeded to whack him around. Chuck sat down, and he said, Bill's beat me up before, and blah, blah, blah. It's no big deal, blah, blah. Finds out he's homeless, living in a car. Hires him for a year. He meets Menahem Golan, Chuck's producer at the time.
Chuck
and
Norris
a year
hired
later,
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
He gets the Bloodsport that this phony Frank Dukes wrote, this lying, phony story about, and that made his career. Okay?
Yeah, I get the impression you don't like Frank Dukes.
I don't like liars, cheaters, or thieves, drug dealers, pimps, criminals, wife beaters. You know what? Martial arts should be about being of good character.
Yes.
And Jean-Claude is a bad character, and hopefully he'll learn someday. Steven Seagal is of bad character. Bill Wallace is of bad character. Those people I don't like. And just because you're a world champion doesn't make you a good person. So I don't like liars, cheaters, and thieves. I'm a man of character. I'm married 47 years. I love my wife like you do, and I believe that you should respect your country, your marriage, and your vows.
Bob, the other day on the telephone, you shared with me your lineage and pedigree as a black belt in multiple martial arts, and it was incredibly impressive. Would you please run us through that and share that with us?
Be happy to. I've been blessed, as I told you. So I started off as a skinny little 93-pound, 5-foot-pound weakling who had to leave home at 13 because my father stuck hay to my arm, screwdrivers in my hand, and hammers in my face, as you've seen. And so rather than kill him, I just got out of Dodge, moved in with a drunk uncle. He didn't know when I got there and didn't know when I graduated from high school, but he was kind. Anyway, so I started wrestling and got my butt kicked and kicked and kicked for the first 2 years. I don't know if I won a wrestling match. But after working with the heavies, I went undefeated for 2 years. And so I got a scholarship for wrestling to college, went there, and had my introduction to judo. Now, I thought it was Jewish bread, but what did I know? When they gave me flying lessons, I thought they were going to kill me. But eventually I made my black belt in the day when there weren't tests. What you did in those days, in the 50s, was you're a white belt, you got to beat 2 green belts in competition. So they're not your cousin or your brother or your aunt who's going to go easy on you, and they try to kill you. Green belt, you have to beat 2 brown belts in competition, and you're a brown belt, you have to beat 2 black belts in competition. So it's kind of a prehistoric MMA, if you will, because they were all trying to kill you. So now I get excited because I learned about the great Gene LeBell, who won the Judo Nationals. I moved to L.A. So my first black belt in judo in 1958 was signed by Issei Kano, the son of the founder, Jigoro Kano, of judo. Moved to L.A. to train with my mentor and my hero, Gene LeBell, the great Gene LeBell, who, by the way, is a Canadian Jew. And And we all know Canadian Jews can't fight, right? Except don't tell Gene that, since he's undefeated in his career and he's 83 years old.
And Bob, be sure to speak directly into your mic because your voice is coming in real faint. Speak directly into your phone.
Gene LeBell
is
a Canadian Jew, and he's probably the most amazing, toughest fighter I've ever faced. 40-plus years of training with him, and I never even came close to second base, but that's another story. But anyway, so I made black belt with Gene LeBell, the great creator of MMA. He beat Milo Savage in 1962. And then I made a black belt in Shorin-ryu, my certificate signed by Izo Shimabuku, the founder of Shorin-ryu, Okinawan. Then I made my fourth black belt under Joe Louis. I was his first black belt, and he was the first super heavyweight world kickboxing champ and created glove knockouts. And then my next black belt was with Chuck Norris, the great. So I always say Gene LeBell made me tough on the ground, and all the years I got my butt kicked in wrestling and with Gene. And then Joe Louis made me tough standing up, but Chuck Norris was my finishing school because he's ambidextrous, got every kick in the book. A lot of kicks that we later taught Bruce Lee came from Chuck Norris, who's amazing. Every kick in the book and more. And then I studied with the Brazilian Machado Jiu-Jitsu for several years. I studied Thai boxing for several years. I studied American boxing for several years. So no more black belts after that, but I keep training because I'm training now. I want to be better.
Bob, share with us how you and Chuck Norris got into business.
Well, I saw him in Salt Lake City in 1964, and he had taken up 3 of his students, and one of them beat Mike Stone, who claims he's undefeated, of course. Well, I didn't count because he was grand champion. And but at any rate, I went over to congratulate him. I thought he was amazing, and I just introduced myself. Then in 1965, he won his first title, and he beat a phenomenal martial artist named Ron Martini out of the Fresno, San Joaquin Valley area. Ron was just an amazing, terrific fighter. I mean, it was a very, very close fight. But Chuck won it with a spinning back kick. I'd never seen one before. I mean, it's just amazing. And Chuck has this amazing control. He can lay you down, he can break your ribs, he can knock you out, but he doesn't because it's point karate. But he did the spinning back kick, and I was just blown away. So I went down, reintroduced myself, and congratulated him. And it was just, you know, we had a connection. His father named Ray, my father named Ray. His father 6'1", 190. My father 6'1", 190. His father born in San Antonio, Texas. Mine in San Antonio, Texas. They both moved to Oklahoma City and meet our Okie mothers named Riva. And guess what his mother's name is? It's so close to Riva that you can't stand it. They're married for 32 years. Both are alcoholics, and they both moved from Oklahoma to California. So we were soulmates from another era. But Chuck is just the kindest, toughest, best person. So that's how our relationship started. And we became partners when Joe Louis wanted to sell out his... Joe Louis and I started a school in 65, and I enrolled 20 students, and Joe would break 20 noses. I'd enroll 20 more students, he'd break 20 more noses. And so finally I said, oh man, these people don't come here to get hurt. They come here to learn how to defend themselves. I'm going to give you the school, Joe. He said, no, I don't like it. I want to sell. So I called Chuck Norris to sell him the school, and he said, no, I want you. Let's be partners. And we became partners. Well, that partnership was amazing because we were egoless. And there's this old saying that at the feast of egotists, everyone goes home hungry. So Chuck Norris is egoless. He knew and I knew that he was the better karate guy. And he knew and I knew I was a better businessman. We never had a contract. Okay, Carlos, his real name, half Indian, half Irish. You're the boss on the mat, I'm the boss off the mat. And 50-plus years later, I love him in the same way I love my wife. Well, in a different way. But on the same level, you understand? He's a great man. He's a Christian. He's tougher than steel. He's kind, and he puts back into society, and he was a fabulous partner. And all along those years, we had disagreements about things, including full contact karate, which he didn't like, but we never raised our voices. We had civil discourse, which this country, America, needs so desperately, in spite of this leaderless, crummy, scummy, lion president we have. We got race relationships that are horrible. We need civil discourse. Carlos, Chuck Norris, and I had always had years of civil discourse. I respect your right to be stupid and wrong, but you need to respect my right to be stupid and wrong, and then we can have civil discourse. And shockingly, God gives you 2 ears and 1 mouth. He wants you to listen twice as much. If you listen to somebody who radically disagrees, you might shockingly learn something. So I've had a blessed career and a blessed relationship and great partners. And like you, I got a great wife of 47 years. But I'm 0-900 against her. Does that count?
Join the club. Now, Bob, Tracy's got a question for you here.
First of all, I want to say happy birthday.
Tracy, I couldn't hear what you said, babe.
I just wanted to say, first off, happy birthday.
Thank you very, very much. When you're 77, that's a big deal.
You're 77 years young.
Yes, and I'm very young.
There you go.
Tracy, you got to be the most phenomenal woman. I can't wait to meet you because your husband brags, almost ad nauseum.
Oh,
He's almost as bad as I am about my wife.
I hope not. I have a quick question for you. As a traditionalist, what are your thoughts on the UFC and the MMA today?
Short answer is I love it. Because as a traditionalist, I love the respect. I love, respecting the traditions that those martial arts come from. I love the discipline. I love a lot of the techniques, which are amazing and are used by MMA. But what I love about MMA is it's reality-based. I've always been a reality-based fighter. In the days when we slowly got to full contact of the body, I went in there and tried to break your ribs. I tried to hurt you as bad as I could. If I could lay you down, I was going to do it. So the techniques are superior. All of us, Tracy, as you well know, we stand on the shoulders of our seniors, of the people who gave us the gift of their knowledge. And constantly things change. I'm a real boxing fan. I have boxing fights from Jack Johnson in 1908 forward. Go back and look at their techniques. Techniques evolve. But because we constantly want to improve them and because we constantly figure out ways to make them better. But we have to first learn the technique of our seniors. And then, God willing, we improve them. And then, God willing, we give our students this knowledge and they improve them. Thus, for sure, Chuck Norris and I have thousands of black belts. Many are better than us. And that's a testament to our teaching. We bow to it. We respect it. Do they try to beat us up? No, because we gave them a little fear. But the truth is, they don't realize until we tell them, you're better. Thank you. Now go out and make other students better.
Bob, tell us about training with Bruce Lee.
Oh, Bruce was another phenomenal character that I'm blessed to have ever known. Bruce was great in a variety of ways. First, he was incredibly bright, loaded with integrity, charisma. Everybody sees it on the screen. And he trained hard. He trained at world-class level. And he was open to anything new. And, in martial arts, the great Gene LeBell once told me when I was training with him, he said, Bob, train in everything. Because everything has something good and everything has something bad. Weed out the bad and go for the good. And Bruce was of that same inclination. And he was just a fun guy to be around. So I've given Bruce Lee seminars all over the world, and they pay me a lot of money to do them. I mainly do them because, A, I love meeting the fans of Bruce, but B, I love explaining to them. I start my seminars always the same. I say, you guys all love Bruce Lee because, in my opinion, he created the greatest martial arts film of all time, Enter the Dragon. And a few others he did weren't so bad either. But nobody's beat it. It's the highest grossing martial arts film in history, second highest grossing film in Warner Brothers history. Bruce was kind. He was a magician. A lot of people don't know that, but he liked to take quarters out of kids' ears and give them back to them. He was fun. He was charismatic. So I say, you love Bruce Lee because he was handsome, he was a brilliant physique, and very charismatic. He married ballet to martial arts and set up fight scenes second to none. So he was just a lot of fun to be with. He's like any good person. Did he pee you off sometimes? Of course. Was he challenging? Of course. He'd walk up to a Mexican. I don't like Mexicans with mustaches. And if that Mexican said, well, I don't like short Chinamen, he was 5'7", he fell in love with you. But he was a challenger. He wanted to put it out there to you to find out if you were going to respond and be a man or a woman. I absolutely I loved the 11 years that I got to train with him, and the things he taught me and the things I taught him were just phenomenal.
Bob, can I ask you another question?
Tracy, who's going to say no to Tracy?
You flatter too much, I'm telling you.
You know how we men are. We'll do anything to have you like us, if you get my drift.
What would you like to see for future martial artists as they evolve today?
Can you repeat, Tracy?
Sure. How would you like to see the future for martial artists as they evolve? What do you see for them?
I see the future of martial arts is it's really pretty obvious if you think about it, because go back to Cain and Abel, brothers with murder. So we've always had, from the time God created us, we've had hate, love, jealousy, and on and on and on. All the emotions, right? And virtually none of those have improved over evolution. But by 1950, scientific knowledge doubled. 1980, it doubled again. 2000, it doubled again. We constantly have things that are mind-blowing scientifically. But human nature is slow to evolve, from racism to stinking thinking. Thus, the need, the desperate need, like sand in the desert for water to grow plants, is we need character building. We need to be constantly thinking good thoughts and doing good things and having good energy. And so martial arts gives us that. So like every profession, I don't care if it's the most important professions to me are martial artists, policemen, firemen, school teachers, and so forth. Most of them are underpaid professions, unlike some of the wrong pay scales with movie stars, drug dealers, criminals, high pay. But the reality is that those people, with the exception of 1 or 2%, have bad and everything in life, is my dream is that we keep instilling in the martial arts of the future that you need to challenge your techniques, you need to constantly train in different things, go with the best, train with the best, train as hard as the best, but work on your character. And train with people who will give you real life lessons, like be respectful. What's wrong with being respectful? Let's just take an example of our presidential Republican candidate, Donald Trump. A lot of people have high thoughts about him. Either they hate him or they love him. But he's done a very, very good thing for America in that, first of all, he's shaken up our scummy political scene. He makes people think. But what do you see? You see people, 50 years ago, I got an attorney, a Jewish attorney named Dave Glickman. He was left of Lenin. I was right of Attila the Hun. But because we've had 50 years of civil discourse where I don't hate him, I just want him to respect my right to be stupid and wrong. He respects my right to be stupid and wrong. We have civil discourse. No violence. I don't hate him. I don't want him dead. They go violently and protest Trump's rallies. Well, in my opinion, they're idiots. They're uneducated, probably dope-smoking bean brains. We all have a right, at least in America, to free speech. And just because somebody says something you don't like, that's sad. That's pathetic. I think you're an ignorant idiot when you do that. No violent protest. How about peaceful protest? How about respecting somebody's right to be wrong? How about respecting their right to say something outrageous? What Trump has done is stimulate conversation. So I'm a big fan of civil discourse. So to answer your question in the long, I want martial artists of the future to realize it's not just about being tough. It's about being a nice person. It's about not being a mate beater, not being a drug addict, not being an alcoholic, facing your diseases and demons and fixing them, and become a better human being. And that's really, because Tracy, isn't it simpler to just get a gun and shoot somebody? Criminals do it all the time. Or get a knife or a bomb, or in these pathetic scum ISIS who just kill innocent people, have no respect for anything. Teach respect.
That's
Leave,
right.
leave the
Love of
ego
your
at the
country.
door.
Teach love of your family. That's what I want the future of martial arts to be, and it will be. But it's grown and grown and grown, and it's going to grow more.
Bob, we got to wrap up in the next 2 minutes, and I have 2 questions, so we're going to have to do short answers to these ones, but they're important questions, and I really wanted to fit them in tonight. The first one is, in your opinion, who was the greatest fighter?
Well, if you're talking about MMA,
Martial arts.
martial arts, when back in the day, it was Chuck Norris. On screen, it was Bruce Lee. MMA was George St. Pierre. That man is amazing, and he's a class act. I've never been privileged to meet him, but there's categories of martial arts, and that's just picking three. Those are the ones I would name the greatest.
Good. And in 60 seconds or less, how is full contact karate changing in lieu of the UFC and MMA? How is full contact traditional karate tournaments
doing well,
changing?
particularly when they understand that you need low kick, you need full contact, you need proper rules. And so when they dial in proper rules and low kicks, they've got it. And it's still an exciting sport.
Bob Wall, thank you for joining us this evening. It is a privilege, always a pleasure. We look forward to having you back many times and having you
Tracy
back
and Joseph,
soon.
thank you. And bless you. You guys are great. It's always a pleasure, and I'm dying to meet Tracy.
As are we. Thanks so much, Bob.
Sal, have a great, strong end.
Thank you. Be sure to tune in next week for more candid discussions and perspectives with stars of the Octagon, full contact karate, kickboxing, and martial arts cinema. You've been listening to Martial Arts World Radio. I'm Joseph Clark.